what do you like? Tell me what you like.
There's value in that because it almost gives the brain like a vacation, right?
Holistic health is completely underappreciated, but so critical.
Eating whole foods, and
the key is just to find something that you really enjoy.
Welcome to the NAMP Nourishing You podcast. I'm Kristen Burkett.
And I'm Diana Wally. We're your hosts for NAMP's podcast dedicated to connecting holistic health enthusiasts with each other to share practical information from the holistic wellness space for enhanced vitality.
Diana and I are master nutrition therapists, board certified in holistic nutrition with private practices and an online joint venture that supports clients and practitioners as they strive to reach their full potential. We're honored to be hosting this podcast for NAMP and connecting our listeners with the latest in holistic wellness.
If you enjoyed today's show, help us out by commenting below, liking this video, and subscribing to the channel to help us spread the word.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Nourishing You podcast. We're thrilled to talk with Jess Kelley today about metabolic ways to support cancer care. Jess is a nutrition therapist, journalist, and metabolic educator, but started out as a licensed sea captain and Hurricane Island outward bound instructor. So interesting. She completed an undergraduate degree in journalism at Western Colorado University and her master nutrition therapy training at the Nutrition Therapy Institute in Denver, Colorado. After graduating from the MNT program in 2010, she instructed several courses at NTI from 2011 to 2015. In 2012, Jess founded the consulting company Remission Nutrition in order to provide therapeutic nutrition guidance and support to children and adults navigating the cancer process worldwide. After several years of working directly with hundreds of clients with various types of cancer, the company expanded and added additional consultants to the team. Jess sold Remission Nutrition to longtime lead consultant and ONI grad Jen Nolan in the summer of 2022. From there, Jess went on to create and direct the Oncology Nutrition Institute, which provides online certification programs globally for practitioners in the field of integrative metabolic oncology nutrition therapy. Jess is the best-selling co-author of 2 books, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, Integrating Deep Nutrition, the Ketogenic Diet, and Nontoxic Bio-Individualized Therapies, and Bioregulatory Medicine, an innovative holistic approach to self-healing. Welcome, Jess. It is so fun to have you on the show today. And personally, I am so proud to be able to share you and your expertise with our audience. You were one of my primary instructors at the Nutrition Therapy Institute. I have to say, you were really my favorite instructor there. I probably shouldn't say that, but I'm going to. And you were very patient with me as I grew in my understanding and knowledge along the way. I think back to some of the things I turned in and I thought, oh, wow, boy, did things change. But anyway, I'm so excited also for our practitioners, for the practitioners that you work with, once again, at the Oncology Nutrition Institute. They're so lucky to have you overseeing their education. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Diana. I have to say you are both some of my all-time favorite students, and it's such an honor and a joy to be sort of full circle with you both, being able to have this conversation. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is really special. You know, we feel so fortunate, as Kristen said, that we had the opportunity to know you and learn from you over the years, you know, both in school and in our own nutrition practices. And thank you so much for what you contribute to our field, you know, to all types of holistic practitioners. Mm-hmm. To get us started, we'd love to hear a recap of your story and how you came into the holistic field, specifically, you know, how your interest came about in supporting cancer care.
Well, I grew up in a family full of healthcare providers, and when I was younger, my dad was a respiratory therapist and did home healthcare. So I got to drive around and go into people's houses and sort of see the beauty of home healthcare and getting to know patients really well and seeing how he responded to them and their lifestyle and what, how to really educate them to get them to make changes. And so from there, after I went and did my journalism degree, I'd always had a passion for health and healing. And so I went to NTI in Denver, and that was really such a comprehensive program. And from there, sort of began what I call a family practice nutrition consulting service. And in Durango, Colorado, so I worked both virtually and live with one-on-one with clients, and started working with Dr. Naisha Winters and some of the crew at Namaste Health Center in Durango, Colorado. And we started seeing just a big influx in the amount of people walking in the door who were in a cancer process. And so because I'm very detailed, I found that it was hard to shift from seeing, say, a weight loss client to an autoimmune, and then someone who walked in who was in the middle of a complex chemotherapy protocol and had a specific type of cancer. So I felt that in order to best serve that group, I really needed to become specialized in oncology nutrition. And I looked around like, boy, where can I get additional training? How can I learn more? You know, I had mentors in the field of integrative oncology like Dr. Naisha Winters and Dr. Kirsten West and many others. And so sort of started to grow in that oncology nutrition space. And then Naisha was like, hey, you're a writer, let's write a book. So we put together the Metabolic Approach to Cancer, and that is really became a framework for people to start to assess their own terrain. It's certainly not a treatment for cancer, but just sort of getting to know thyself a little bit, and then some tools for balancing of bioregulatory systems. And then because at the time there was no way to get continuing education in oncology nutrition short of being an RD and going through their very comprehensive board exam, which because I was not an RD, I wasn't really ready to go back to school to become that direction. So decided to sort of dig in and create a program for practitioners like myself and others who are interested in metabolic oncology nutrition. And I was born the Oncology Nutrition Institute in 2017, and it's been incredible because we have a global audience, and we're reaching a lot of medical doctors who just haven't gotten that nutrition education, but they know that it will help their patients sort of with quality of life. That's a big thing, going through and recovering from cancer. So along the way, my dad passed away from glioblastoma multiforme, GBM, which is a very highly aggressive form of brain cancer. So that diagnosis happened when we were writing the book. So I was very motivated to look as much into dietary therapies as much as possible to assist with brain cancer. So I sort of got to be on both sides, practitioner and what it's like going through it on the patient side. So here I am. That's the background. That's the short, the short story.
Fantastic. It's really inspiring. I'm sorry about your father and what he went through. I'm grateful that you've had the opportunity to explore this path from both perspectives, because I think it makes you a much richer practitioner for that. So I guess if there's good to come out of something, not so good, there at least is that. And I do think when someone hears the word cancer and gets that type of a diagnosis, it's probably one of the scariest terms they come across in their life. And it's going to shake you in your shoes when that comes. So can you start us off? Just tell us a little bit about the statistics on how many of us might be impacted by that personally.
The statistics currently are quite mortifying. The World Health Organization has estimated that 50% of people globally will be affected by cancer. They just changed the statistics for breast cancer. It used to be 1 in 8 women, and now it's 1 in 6. So it's very, very, very common. And it's hard to shake a stick and not hit someone who hasn't been personally affected either by a close family member or friend. And the rates are increasing. It's eclipsing heart disease as the #1 killer of diseases in the United States.
Wow.
So when a diagnosis is given, it seems almost like there's a big rush to take the next steps. So whether that's surgery or chemo or radiation or what have you, and for obvious reasons, but are there things that we should be considering before rushing into one of the conventional treatments?
Absolutely. So most cancers take 15, 20 years to develop. So a lot of these are slow growing. They're in the background. We see dysfunction happening, well in advance of a diagnosable cancer process. And so, and we hear this all the time, you get diagnosed on a Friday and you're in surgery on a Monday. It can happen incredibly quick. And when someone hears that scary word, they're ready to do whatever it takes. And, certainly taking a minute to digest the information, to get second opinions, to dive in. One of the questions we recommend that folks ask their oncologist is, based on this treatment plan, what's the research that shows the outcomes? So, what can you expect? And so just kind of getting more of a sense of what's going to happen and what are the projected outcomes and what are the downstream effects. We've learned that a lot of, radiation potentially to the chest area for breast cancer could potentially contribute to heart dysfunction later on. So what are the side effects and downstreams of these treatments? And then, taking a breath and getting the body prepared a little bit before you begin can really improve response to therapies and treatments and being able to withstand. So there's a lot to consider before jumping in.
Yeah. So if we were going to do some preparation or think about how to put this together before we jump into some type of treatment, what are some of the different options available to support conventional treatment that most people may not be aware of?
Sure. Well, for surgery, for example, if you give your body a couple weeks to sort of build and fortify, you also would want to come off certain supplements a few weeks in advance, say garlic and omega-3 fatty acids, because they can, increase bleeding. So you kind of, a lot of people at home are doing their own supplement protocol. So if you're on some supplements, you may want to come off first. So a big part of what we teach is making sure that whatever you're doing is not going to interact in a negative way with those conventional treatments. So prepping your body for surgery. When it comes to radiation, research has shown that higher levels of insulin may decrease the efficacy of radiation. So maybe taking a few weeks to get on a lower glycemic diet in order to withstand that and have better outcomes. Immunotherapy. We found in the literature that folks who have a pre-existing autoimmune condition may have more adverse effects from an immunotherapy. So potentially bringing on some dietary therapies like an autoimmune paleo type diet a little bit in advance to just sort of help fortify the body a little bit more so that you don't get whacked as hard from some of these treatments that can have great results, but the more you can go into it a little bit more prepared can make a big difference.
Yeah. I would think it makes a big difference, not only just getting through it, but then the recovery from it and being able to, because it doesn't seem like it's ever just one step. I mean, it's not usually just a surgery. It goes on and on. And so, yeah, so being able to tolerate all of that over that long term, I think would be super important. Do you find most oncologists are open to this kind of thinking?
It has been an incredible journey. We first started, it was, the immediate smackdown. Like the oncologists were like, you can't do that. There's no data. And so that was 10 years ago. And now we're starting to see, a bit of an awakening within the oncology field with a lot of hospitals and research centers being quite a bit more accepting. The more research that we have behind these integrative nutrition approaches, the more apt that we're seeing some openness. So it's been refreshing to see that whereas the door was immediately closed, we're creaking it open a bit more now, and we're seeing a lot more. Many of our students are medical oncologists, and they're realizing that we can make a difference with nutrition. So that's very refreshing and hopeful for all of us in the nutrition field.
And what else is really refreshing, Jess, is that it doesn't have to be an either or. Yeah. So a lot of people will think, oh, I have to go, just the conventional route, or I just want to go the holistic route. But you're saying that synergy can really be helpful for both sides. And it just brings to mind. So today, actually, I was working with a morbidly obese client and discussing, would this be the time to speak to your physician about a weight loss drug? There's a couple of really good new weight loss drugs that are on the market that just might help us to make progress along with nutrition coaching. And I think that there really is a place for both. And I so appreciate you bringing that, both sides together. I think that can help so many people. So yeah, thanks for that.
Absolutely. We want to work hand in hand with the oncologists. We want to, number one, make sure that nothing that we're doing is going to interfere with what they're doing. A lot of clinical trials, they say, let's take a break from these adjuvant supplements or whatever else you're doing because we're studying something. So if you add this in, it may change the efficacy of what we're doing. And so we want to support. That's what we want to do, is we want to, if people have to stop some of these conventional therapies because their platelets get low, or they get too sick, or they get cachexic, and nutrition has a place there to keep people going through their conventional treatments, and be able to tolerate it better instead of having to discontinue altogether. So it can be quite a beautiful synergy.
I love that. Do you find it's always I know you're more on the teaching end now, but in terms of practicing from a nutrition support for oncology issues, do you typically find it's always a blend of that with conventional, or do you have people that are also looking to try to move through the process without the conventional treatments?
We generally recommend for oncology nutrition consultants that people definitely connect with at least a naturopathic oncologist or an oncologist of some kind. Definitely there are people who choose to do that, but we don't recommend that within our scope of practice to say, oh, sure, we'll just take you on, just navigating you through. It's really important to have a medical team working there. We don't feel comfortable trying to guide people through a cancer process without an oncologist on board.
Yeah.
Well, I know that the three of us come from the same place of we want to minimize our risk of chronic disease, right? So that's a lot of what we do in our practices. And, for cancer, what can we do to minimize our risk? So we know that obesity is a risk factor. I was just listening to Dr. Matthew Walker, and for the listener, he's one of the leading sleep researchers, I believe out of Berkeley, I think out of Berkeley. And he was talking about the significant link between sleep and cancer of the prostate, bowel, breast. So, we know that there are things that we can do to reduce the risk factors. So, we know obesity, we know sleep. What are some other risk factors for cancer? And why do you think there isn't more emphasis on this?
Yeah, it's discouraging how little money is dumped into the prevention pot. So in chapter 2 of our book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, we sort of identified many of the risk factors and then came up with, I like to call it like a Cosmo quiz. So we identified 10 areas of the terrain that can become imbalanced, and that imbalance can potentially contribute to a disease process. We know that cancer is a collection of over 200 different diseases and imbalances. So we have to sort of look at a bigger picture. So our terrain areas include genetics, epigenetics, and nutrigenomics. So certainly, understanding your family history is important. Risk factors there, I'll tell you, we do genomic testing has changed the game with customizing dietary therapies. We also, look at obesity, blood sugar balance. That approach. We look at hormone balance, certainly the microbiome, and looking at digestive function. There's a ton of research coming out showing, for example, that the presence of certain microbes in your GI tract can help determine response to certain types of chemotherapy. So really making sure that your microbiome is good. High fiber diets is good. Fiber is so funny. It was like big in the 80s, and then it got dropped, and now we're like, fiber is back on the radar. So immune function, making sure that you're fortifying your immune system with micronutrients and macronutrients. Mental emotional wellness. A lot of cancer we have found over the years is, I say, oh, I'm a nutrition therapist, but 90% of what I do is therapy, because a lot of people have a lot of trauma. And, The Body Keeps Score, that book, fabulous. A lot of these emotional traumas that people haven't really fully processed, that's something to look at and work on, instead of just shoving under the carpet. And biorhythms. Biorhythms is really important. It's probably one of my more favorite terrain areas, like you were talking about with sleep and what we understand about mitochondrial function in our organs that all have clocks. So we are biorhythmic beings of the planet. And so we've become very dysfunctional where, we're looking at screens and artificial light after dark. Breast cancer, one of the risk factors in a class 2 carcinogen listed by the IARC is artificial light at night, because they found that women working in hospital settings, nurses who work the night shift, were more prone to breast cancer. So sort of getting more in touch with our biorhythms seasonally, daily, is very important, and certainly exercise. So there's so many different areas to explore, and so often, we hear from people, oh, I was so healthy before I got diagnosed with cancer, and we can say, well, when we start looking through these 10 terrain areas, it's like, oh boy, red flag, microbiome and mental emotional. Let's dig in there. Let's look at our toxin exposure. What's in your bathroom products? Let's look through some of those things. I mean, you can dig deep, with environmental toxin assessments to see what you're exposed to on a daily basis. It's unbelievable. I mean, scented candles linked in one paper to increased risk of certain breast cancers. So it's a little overwhelming and a little doom and gloom, but instead of having it kind of sideswipe folks and come out of the blue, I think prevention needs to start in childhood. And I think that we can start looking at some of these different areas of the terrain and start assessing them, and sort of taking a closer look at how we live our life on a daily basis.
Absolutely, man, it's so important. And it's really, that's what got me into this field, was digging into those terrain areas to try to improve my odds after an early diagnosis. So it really is, it's amazing once you start digging in how many different areas can be touched, right? To help with that. You're talking, and I believe you're talking all around it here, but for our audience, you've got the book, and it's a wonderful book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer. Can you tell us, what do you mean by metabolic theory? What does that mean?
So Dr. Otto Warburg, back in the early 1900s, basically discovered that cancer cells have altered metabolism. So basically, cancer cells, they're hungry. Cancer cells are fast growing. They want to grow and big and spread and take over, right? And one of their preferred fuel sources is glucose. So the rate of glycolysis, which is how fast a cancer cell can consume glucose, is increased by 60 to 100 times that of a normal cell. Mm-hmm. So cancer cells, they do this in a dysfunctional way, but they do it in such a way that they can sustain their growth. So, for a while there was, the whole sugar feeds cancer. And if you stop eating sugar and glucose and carbohydrates, you'll starve the cancer and it will go away. Well, no, I mean, glucose is a preferred fuel source for cancer cells, but again, they have altered metabolism. So they've been found to also use fatty acids and amino acids to sustain their growth. I shouldn't probably say this, but they sort of become dumpster divers. They're like, I'll eat whatever because I'm hungry and I want to grow and I'll eat anything. And so basically, when we look at this altered metabolism, we're not dealing with a normal cell. So we're trying to, with metabolic nutrition, metabolic dietary therapies like the ketogenic diet or therapeutic fasting, we're trying to reduce the amount of these fuel sources that cancer cells have access to. So cancer cells that they've found are not able to run as efficiently on ketone bodies. So that can be a bit of what I like to call a destabilizing agent. So it's certainly not a cure, but it kind of knocks cancer cells onto one foot, and then maybe some of these other treatments can come in, chemotherapy, whatever, knock them right over. So it's a destabilizer, and so because cancer cells, their metabolism is so unique compared to healthy cells, there's a big growing movement to target this altered metabolism. It's one of the 10 hallmarks of cancer, in addition to immune invasion and being able to evade apoptosis, which is cell death, programmed cell death. So yeah, it's one tool in the toolbox for looking at how to discontinue this frenzied growth is by targeting metabolism.
Okay. And so I could imagine if glucose is the favored fuel source, having a high glycemic diet and high blood sugar and all of that is not going to help your case, right? It's probably...
It's not going to be the best approach. No.
Okay. I mean, I totally understand what you're saying about you can't just starve the cancer by going low sugar, low carb, but it definitely is part of the process is to get that main fuel source down so that we're not just providing a garden for those cancer cells to feed on. Right. Okay. So once there's a cancer diagnosis, what are some of the basics we need to be aware of in terms of maybe going into the metabolic nutrition and how this might be different than the conventional standard of care? What's different from the perspective that you bring to the table to work with an oncology provider or, a cancer patient that they may not hear?
Well, for a long time, the way that cancer was approached, in inpatient settings with the nutrition programs within, it was really focused on calories. And the concern is always, we've heard it a billion times, doctor will say, doesn't matter what you eat, just don't lose weight. And that, so then we see a lot of pushing of high calorie drinks because, we've thought calories in, calories out. If you have more calories, you won't lose weight, and that will help your body to be able to withstand these therapies. Now, there's different kinds of weight loss. There's metabolic weight loss. There's therapeutic weight loss. There's cachexia, which is a muscle wasting that's driven by inflammation that affects upwards of 50 to 80% of those doing conventional therapy and in a cancer process. And what we're finding in the research and clinically is that when we are getting into ketosis or fasting, say, around chemotherapy, we're allowing those other treatments to come on board with a lot more strength. So as opposed to thinking calories, when we get ketones, for example, those ketones are going to have more of a buckshot approach of balancing the terrain. They're very helpful for, neurological function. We have folks going through conventional treatment will say, geez, I feel better doing this ketogenic diet, going through conventional therapy than I did before I got cancer. And so we're seeing a nice improvement to the quality of life. Certainly being at a healthy weight is going to be very helpful for wound healing after surgery. So if someone's overweight, bringing on some of these metabolic dietary therapies to help them safely lose weight can be very effective as opposed to just sort of that calorie mindset.
Okay.
And, I've just heard anecdotally that many cancer patients aren't hungry when they're going through treatment. And so, going off what you said, it makes me wonder if that isn't sort of nature's way, if fasting can be beneficial. Just curious about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I tell people is, if you look at animals in the wilderness, if they eat something poisonous, they curl up and they sleep and they don't eat. Right. So when your body is fasting, it's this differential stress response. And so it protects the healthy cells. And that's what we want to do, is we want to protect the healthy cells while making the cancer cells more vulnerable. And some of the great work by Dr. Walter Longo has shown in human studies that folks who are fasting during chemotherapy had less hair loss, less nausea. So sort of some of these quality of life markers that really can help people going through these conventional treatments. And yes, I mean, it's very scary, and we've scared many oncology nurse when folks go in and they're like, I'm fasting, but it's becoming more and more accepted as we're seeing the more research come out. But it's like people want to feed. It's like this nurturing thing, like, oh, you should be eating. You're going through, let's make you a cake and a cookies and casseroles and all these things. And, if you're not hungry, don't eat, I think is some of the best, most simple nutrition advice that you can offer. So when there's actually a paper that was out on childhood leukemia and found that children which pediatrics is a ballgame of its own, and all of this needs to be overseen by a qualified practitioner, but kids that were fasting around this leukemia had better outcomes with the treatment when they were eating less. It's okay. We're so scared of not eating. And I think we can sort of get back to times with, human evolution where we would go periods without eating and go into ketosis, which is why we have this ancient metabolic pathway. That's why humans have it, is to be able to switch our metabolism from running on glucose, which I call gasoline, to running on ketones, which is like a diesel fuel. It's a slower burning fuel. So why do we have that? It's important. So I think we shouldn't be so scared of missing a snack, or cutting back on our calories a little bit. Yeah.
Right. So what about protein? I see a lot of different things in the media and stuff about protein for people going through cancer therapies. What is your thought here?
Yes. And, this comes down to the key importance of bio-individualized and personalized nutrition, because everybody is different. So when we can't say, there's the meat is bad camp and the meat is good, we need to really get specific and detailed about, first of all, what treatments is someone going through? Are they deficient in protein? Are we looking at protein levels in these folks? That's really important. The body does require amino acids to function. In fact, protein and vitamin C are two of the most important nutrients to help wound healing post-surgery. So having protein in the diet, typically on the oncology landscape, 10 to 20%, is a good sort of target. However, if someone is recovering or they're cachexic, these personalized diets, they need to adapt and they need to change. I think, as a lot of practitioners sort of get one size fits all. It's all square peg round hole. And you're like, well, geez, their symptoms changed or their treatment changed. Their protein requirements could have changed. Their macronutrient whole pie chart could have changed. And we need to be able to let the patient drive the protocol back to the practitioner and say, we're looking at lab work, we're looking at micronutrient testing to determine the protein needs of a person so that they don't become deficient, because that can cause immune deficiencies and a whole host of other side effects that we don't want to have.
You mentioned protein amino acids being important for recovery and vitamin C being the next most important one. And it's just something I always go through with my clients, is to remind each other that, we're like the only mammal that doesn't make our own vitamin C. And it's so important to replenish that every day. I mean, even if you're not going through cancer care, we need vitamin C. And I think people forget that we don't make that on our own. And we need to be accessing that in our food every day. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's a water soluble vitamin. And the more stressed you are, the more it goes right through you. And, if my big push is to see if we can get nutrient testing into the conventional landscape, so we can actually identify some of these deficiencies, so we're not guessing and shooting targets in the dark. And, a lot of times we see people come through the door and they're on so many supplements. And we're really big on sort of the food first approach, and certainly food quality, and just sort of circling back to that protein conversation. I mean, when we say protein can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So whether it's, a piece of steak or a pea protein or a whey protein or this, we have to really get specific, on what type of protein, where it comes from, the quality. For example, farmed fish is going to have far less omega-3 fatty acids than wild-caught fish. So you can't just say, oh, salmon's great. It's like, well, what kind? Where did it come from? Food quality is really one of the pillars of what we teach at the school. And it was big for us when we were going through our nutrition training. And I think that it gets really lumped into just one big protein, conversation, but there's so many nuances to what your protein sources are. And that is critically important.
Yeah, well, your food first approach, your personalized approach, it's so refreshing. Is there, before we move on, is there anything else you wanted to touch on from a nutrition perspective, whether it's hydration or dairy, soy, anything else that we missed as far as nutrition?
Yeah, there's lots of myths out there around cancer care and different nutrients. So maybe we just do a quick round of some myth busting. That would be fun.
I like that.
That's we did weekly team meetings with the consulting team at Remission Nutrition. We kind of talked through what these are called, like common conversations, because people are like, should I eat dairy? Should I eat soy? Should I be vegan, plant-based? It's just sort of all of this, like what's right and what's not. And, I will say that, for people who say, oh, I'm going to jump on the plant-based platform, that if people don't know the difference between hemi and non-hemi iron, or beta carotene and vitamin A, we're not ready to do a vegan diet, because these nutrients are required by the body. And if people aren't testing and looking at some of these markers, we're going to see some depletions happening. And so that's where it's really important that we're getting micronutrient testing on board. I mean, just take vitamin D. I mean, it's like you run a vitamin D, and I'm seeing numbers of like 16 in these pediatric populations. And it's like, okay, well, what else is depleted? We're seeing a lot of vitamin A depletion, et cetera. So I just want to quantify that a no protein diet can be very dangerous, and it needs to be done very carefully. When it comes to we'll pick soy, because 1 in 6 women get diagnosed with breast cancer estimates now. And, there's a lot of research which needs to be kind of gone through very carefully. But, that is a very bio-individualized food. It's a very bioactive food. It contains, these powerful phytoestrogens. And if we don't know someone's, we run Dutch tests so to look at hormones and hormone metabolism, so we can see if someone's processing some of these estrogens into good estrogens or bad estrogens. We also want to look at a nutrigenomic profile to see how some of these phytoestrogens may or may not be getting processed. And also important to know that, soy is beautiful for an Asian population that may have grown up eating traditional soy products, tempeh, tofu, these fermented traditional soy products that are eaten alongside of sea vegetables. And these sea vegetables they've found is really what stimulates the proliferation of certain microbes that are what actually activates the genistein and the diazidine to be, powerful here. So there's a lot of considerations, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, if I pick up a soy protein powder, that's probably not what we're going for. So again, it comes down to quality, and it comes to source, it comes to genetics, it comes to, if someone walks in and their 16 estrogens are through the roof, I don't think we want to be pushing more. It depends on if they have a hormone sensitive cancer. And our students get so frustrated because a lot of times the answer really is, it depends. It depends on the person, which is why you do need to work with a qualified oncology nutrition consultant. So soy's a big conversation. And I think, we tend to err on the conservative side of, until you know whether or not soy works for you, maybe stick with some less controversial phytoestrogens like some ground flax. So that's something that's high in fiber, good phytoestrogens, some efficacy around certain chemotherapy agents. And so that one it's a tricky one. That's a tricky food. So I don't know if that helps, but it depends.
Can you touch on dairy real quick? Because I know that's another one that gets talked about a lot. Yeah.
So there was The Story of the Human Body. If you haven't read that book, it's so good. And it kind of goes through some of these genetic adaptations that humans have gone through in order to get used to new food sources. So I know it seems like a long time ago, but during the agricultural revolution, when we shifted from being paleo hunter-gatherers to being more agriculturally dominant, where we're doing more grains, and we started adding more dairy products, which our ancestors had known really needed to be fermented in order to be able to be digested well. So there was a big shift there. And so our genomes changed in order to be able to handle dairy products a little bit better. But now we do see, you guys probably know better, the rates of dairy intolerances and allergies are quite significant because we really don't have the enzymes to break down some of the lactose and the sugars in the dairy products, especially if there's any damage to the microbiome, say from antibiotics or whatever it is. And so if we run, say, an IGF-1 and that's really through the roof, we may take people off of dairy as a general. It also comes down to type of dairy. So there's different cows produce different types of milk. So there's the A1 milk, A2, different people digest those a little bit better. If someone's like, I can't live without my cheese, we generally tend to push them a little bit towards maybe sheep or goat milk cheese, which tends to be a little bit easier to digest, instead of saying, I'm going to have some, skim milk from a CAFO cow that could be laced with hormones, antibiotics. Again, it really comes down to the source and the quality of dairy. And then, if anyone has digestive symptoms going on that we may want to come at, if someone's going on to an immunotherapy, we probably want to consider an autoimmune paleo type diet so that we're not reacting so much. If your body's immune system is reacting to some of these bigger proteins and sugars and things like that, it's not going to have as much time, that immunosurveillance happening for these cancer cells. It won't be able to focus as much. So it's one of those things that we tend to, it's not top of the list as a recommended food. It's certainly bio-individualized, but quality and amount is pretty key.
You're speaking our language for sure. Yeah. So
or maybe we're speaking her language.
That's right.
She taught it to us in the first place.
Yes, we are copying your language. You're right, Kristen. So before we wrap up, what do you recommend for the listener who doesn't have a cancer diagnosis, but is scared by the word like we all are and really wants to be proactive and to avoid cancer as best they can. What do you recommend? And I'm thinking about, obviously diet, stress, exercise, lifestyle. Like, what kind of things do you recommend for those of us who want to try to be as healthy as we can?
Mhm. The first place we usually start, and you mentioned this earlier, is just being hydrated, and looking at our water sources. So we have folks go on that EWG. They came out with that great water database where you can plug in your zip code and see the toxins in just city water supplies is pretty amazing. So if water is sort of our number one macronutrient that we want to have, you can live without food for quite some time, but we can't live without water. So that's sort of our number one. And there's some, so looking at your water source, making sure that you are hydrated is super important. Most people are dehydrated. And so that's going to sort of muddy the waters. I say the solution to pollution is dilution. So if we live in a toxic world and you're not hydrated, you're not going to be sort of flowing things out. So I think, and that's just an easy place to get started, is making sure that you're getting enough water a day. And then the second thing I think is just a variety of fruits and vegetables. So, I think the 5 a day, the My Plate or whatever, they recommend 5 different fruits and vegetables a day. We want people having at least 30 different varieties during a week. The phytonutrients that are present in different plant foods, from especially herbs. So everyone should have a little cilantro growing in their windowsill, or grow some broccoli sprouts in your windowsill, and just getting some of these more vegetables in. I think the statistics are that, 9 out of 10 Americans don't eat any vegetables. I just think that getting some color on the plate and some variety and diversity, and some fresh food and fiber is really huge. And then probably the third thing is sleep. We've just see a bit, and you mentioned this earlier, is that we are not sleeping well. People are really stressed out. So taking some pressure off ourselves to sort of do it all and get some rest, and certainly, being in tune biorhythmically. So right now, in the winter in the Northern Hemisphere, it's okay to hibernate. It's okay to go to bed, get in bed early and sleep and read and rest. So we're not very good at resting. Many of us, we're pushing as hard as we can. So I think giving yourself permission to just chill out and just do some creative projects that may fill your tank a little bit more is really important, and kind of lost in the recommendations that we get from our yearly checkup with our primary care.
Fantastic. And so what about you personally? How have you incorporated these principles in your own life?
Yeah, so I'm definitely my own test subject. I test on my family as well. But over the years, what I found is, and this is based, a bit in research, is, so what I find from a preventative standpoint is sort of in the winter months where so we're growing an organic garden here at the school, where we're really sort of trying to grow some of the most nutrient dense varieties. So in summertime, there's more light. You've got more access to all these beautiful carbohydrates growing in your garden, right? You're out, you're doing more, great. So yeah, definitely eat a lot more fruits and vegetables in the summertime. And if you look at my garden right now, it's coated in ice. So winter's a lovely time to be more ketosis, fasting, sort of being more in that kind of hibernation. There's some evidence that shows there's different metabolic switches that happen in response to light and melatonin and all that. So adjusting your diet, and this comes from Ayurveda, this comes from traditional Chinese medicine. Everyone's been adjusting their dietary therapies based on time of year. I think really being in tune with what's available seasonally and in your geographical area has been really super fun for me. So we do hunt wild turkey and fish, and try to grow as much of our own food as possible, in order to get that local and most nutrient dense food as possible. And so yeah, it's fun.
Nice.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, this has been so much fun, especially for Kristen and I. We have been looking forward to this for quite some time. So we'd love, though, for the listener, could you share how people can find out more about you, about the school, any social media? How can we get in touch with you?
Yeah. So the Oncology Nutrition Institute, oncologynutritioninstitute.com. We've got a website. We do have some free guest lectures up there if people want to just kind of plug in, take a class, listen in, sort of see, so we can do a little public education there. Our newsletter is pretty comprehensive with research, recipes, tools. Our website does have a macronutrient calculator. I'm so excited about this, you guys. This has been on my to-do list for like 12 years. So you can plug in sort of your calculations and it will give you sort of a breakdown, protein, fat, carbohydrates, sort of if you want to do a keto diet. So we've got a lot of, good things on the website to kind of just get you going. And I'm on LinkedIn, and the school's on LinkedIn. I'm not big on social media. And then the book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, is a really great place to start and read, certainly from prevention.
If listeners had a family member or themselves that wanted to find an oncology nutrition practitioner that's graduated from your school, where would they go about finding somebody like you to work with?
Yeah, we have a Find a Grad tab on the website. So you can see, where countries, we've got a lot of different countries there and also in the United States. So Find the Grad tab is a great spot. And we love our friends at Remission Nutrition. They're all ONI grads and have been working together for a long time. So they speak our language as well. So that would be my recommendation.
Fantastic. I know a lot of people are going to be wondering how to supplement what they're doing right now in their cancer care journey with some proper nutrition guidance. So I'm glad that we can provide that resource out there. This has been just fantastic, Jess. There's just so many people touched by this topic. It's going to be so wonderful. And I know we're going to have a grateful audience for the information. So we will have links to all of that you've just discussed and your social media in the notes for the show. So thank you for giving us that and appreciate you.
Yeah. You have such a great way about you, and to take a complex topic and make it so relatable. Thank you. You're saving the world. Appreciate it. Really appreciate it. And I know if I have a loved one that gets a cancer diagnosis, I'm calling you first thing.
Call me anytime. It's such an honor to be able to connect with you guys again after all these years, and thank you for the great work that you're doing and helping spread information about nutrition. Thank you.
Yeah, well, take care. And thank you everyone for listening as always. We can't wait to see you next time. Until then, be well.
If you'd like to access other episodes or subscribe so you don't miss a beat, you can find us at nanp.org/NANP-podcast.
Membership in the NANP provides you with a competitive advantage. Whether you're a current practitioner or a student, we want you to become an active, informed leader of the holistic nutrition community and join today at nanp.org. NANP is very proud to provide the highest level of professional recognition and validation in the holistic nutrition industry through the board certification in holistic nutrition credential. To earn this valuable designation, candidates must demonstrate an exceptional level of knowledge and understanding of holistic nutrition by passing a board exam and documenting client contact hours. Are you ready to boost your credibility with board certification? Visit nanp.org today to apply.
Keep in mind that the information on the NANP podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical or legal advice. The NANP is not liable or responsible for any harm, damage, or illness arising from the use of the information contained herein. By listening to the information on this podcast, you agree to defend, indemnify, and hold harmless the NANP and all agents. Copyright NANP, all rights reserved.